a minute here for folks to join and introductions, and then if folks keep joining, all the better. So hey, welcome everybody to the CACR Speaker Series today, which is being co-sponsored with the Kelley School of Business, and we are just thrilled to highlight two distinguished cybersecurity thought leaders from right here in Indiana. First off, our Chief Information Officer for the state at the Indiana Office of Technology, Tracy Barnes, who was appointed by Governor Holcomb back in March 2020. Tracy is responsible for a tremendous variety of initiatives these days, including overseeing the Office of Technology and providing strategic oversight of the state's technology portfolio, as well as leadership on technology and cybersecurity policy. Tracy brings significant business leadership and information technology expertise to his role, having previously served as the Chief of Staff for the Lieutenant Governor, Deputy Auditor, and IT Director for the Indiana Auditor of State. Additionally, he was President and Chief Executive Officer for Intap, which designed and delivered effective enterprise-focused IT solutions to organizations in various industries across the globe. Tracy's been recognized as Inc. magazine's 9th fastest growing Black entrepreneur and has received accolades from top 50 Indiana companies, To Watch, TechPoint, the Miro Awards, a tremendous amount of accolades, which are all very well deserved. He also holds a BS in computer science from Butler, a certificate from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and an MS in cybersecurity law from the University of Maryland at Baltimore. So welcome, Tracy. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you. Very happy to be here.
We are honored, sir. And we're also joined by Indiana's Cybersecurity Program Director, Chetrice Mosley-Romero, who works collaboratively with public and private stakeholders to administer the development and implementation of the state's cybersecurity strategy and policy through the Governor's Executive Council on Cybersecurity. Basically, Chetrice knows everybody in the state related to cybersecurity. So she's not only a consummate networker and coordinator, but has made a lot of things happen across the state, which we're all very thankful for. We're going to be hearing more about. Prior to her current role, she was Executive Director of External Affairs for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, where she led the Public Relations, Policy, and Consumer Affairs divisions. Additionally, she oversaw the commission's continuity of operations plan and emergency management role, along with a heck of a lot else. And I have to say, I think based on one of our previous conversations, I hope it's okay to mention it, Chetrice, you're also, I believe, the first female cybersecurity coordinator for any state government, which I think deserves its own recognition and accolades. And the fact that not only that, but you've managed to maintain and be so successful in this role for so many years across several administrations now. I mean, my goodness. Very, very well done indeed. So welcome, Chetrice.
Thank you. I mean, after you read what Tracy and I have done, no wonder you and Tracy and I were tired all the time.
That's right.
It's a lot, but we're very happy to be here.
No, absolutely. No, we are just thrilled, and kind of unlike the typical CACR Speaker Series format that we're all familiar with and very much enjoy in terms of a longer formal presentation followed by some Q&A at the end. Today is a bit more of a fireside chat format, so we're going to be encouraging lots of questions from all of you for both Tracy and Chetrice, and we also have a few kind of pre-planned questions to get the creative juices flowing. So to that point, first, just given that it's so front of mind for all of us today, and I know I speak for everybody when I just mentioned that our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Ukraine who are living through a tremendously challenging day and time, but that does have a cybersecurity component to it, including potentially threats to critical infrastructure, not only in Ukraine, unfortunately, but even back here in the States, even in Indiana. So I'm wondering, perhaps, Tracy, you could kick us off by talking a little bit about, the geopolitical implications of cybersecurity these days, the fact that what's happening in Eastern Europe now, and Ukraine in particular, can have ramifications, can have blowback even here to Indiana companies and critical infrastructure providers. So any thoughts you'd like to share along those lines, sir?
Yeah, I'll just chime in quickly and say, you said it can have ramifications, and I'm telling you firsthand, it absolutely does and will. I mean, that's the reality that we need to acknowledge and accept and really embrace and realize that the traditional old days of warfare being face to face and mostly happening outside of the borders of the United States here and truly outside of the borders of Indiana, those days are no longer here. This current situation that there are very active current threats and activities going on, because this is the way that they, as geopolitical leaders and overseers, feel it's their best way to subtly disrupt and have an impact without truly considering themselves at war and being able to have some level of plausible deniability. And what makes it even more challenging is that when we look at how our country operates, critical infrastructure, that's what hurts us the most. And that's mostly not in the hands of the military and not in the hands of government. It's sitting in our backyards, it's sitting in our neighborhoods, it's in our communities at the very local level. But it has the biggest impact on direct interactions and disruptions to us individually. And so those become very good targets that, and unfortunately, because of just the years of deprioritization of cyber, somewhat fairly easy targets to start honing in on, reaching out to, and having an impact that definitely puts us in position to put us on our heels to figure out how do we address this, how do we deal with this. I mean, the Colonial Pipeline situation was as disruptive as it was. I mean, it was kind of a wake-up call, I think, for all of us, and that was financially motivated, financially driven, but just to think about the economic impact that came out of that, with cars lined up for days for gas, folks fleeing communities trying to get out, just the loss of trust in government as well, that stemmed from that as well, and understanding the technology and the footprint of what was going on there, and then seeing that be potentially weaponized in multiple areas and jurisdictions across the United States. So yeah, I'll just reiterate, this is a legitimate home issue, despite it being a few thousand miles away from Indiana and Indianapolis, that we need to continue raising the alarm, raising the alerts, keeping people aware, encouraging more and more attentiveness and diligence and hygiene to protect ourselves in our day-to-day lives here.
Such important and good points, Tracy. Thank you so much. Yeah, Chetrice, please.
Yeah, I mean, I most certainly echo Tracy's points, especially as it comes to, as we oversee the state strategy, and we work with our partners on the states. I find that what we're seeing, and while to Tracy's point, it seems like it's far away, it really isn't. And what we're seeing unfolding here is, when you're watching the news, we have a foreign leader, nation states, actively and very in front of everybody using cybersecurity. I mean, taking down and launching cyber attacks alongside kinetic attacks. And that's exactly, what we have been talking about for years. Whenever we meet with our military leaders, that is absolutely what they said is going to be what the wars moving forward are going to be and consist of. So, talking to the audience here as we're developing the next generation of people, as we're, trying to figure out, those correlations and connections, and how to make that most certainly as relative as it can be for the everyday person here in Indiana, the local governments in Indiana, the businesses in Indiana, the state, at Tracy's charge, we're needing to be reminded every time we see what's happening in Ukraine that it's not going to take ships and boots on ground in the US when there's retaliations. We're going to see exactly what's happening in Ukraine over the last week. Cyber attacks first, inching into the financial markets, going into the governments, taking down websites to spread and the disinformation that's happening out there. And that they are not going to be the only ones. Most certainly the US has been under attack for many years with misinformation campaigns from Russia, with specific attacks like SolarWinds from Russia. So it's been this quiet, basically monster in the background that we've all been talking about. And now, unfortunately, we're seeing that ugly head rear from our TV screens. So I think it's important for everybody, as at the top of the mind for myself and most certainly Tracy as a CIO of the state and leading a lot of our efforts, that, we have to rely on the tools and resources out there as we are communicating with people and everyone, right? This should be something that we're talking with our friends about, we're talking with our peers about, we're talking with our, colleagues, because leadership, CISA, which is just remarkable in a lot of their resources, they've really come out in the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic. They actually have a campaign right now, and I'll put it in our chat for everybody to have access to. It's called the Shields Up campaign. And it's them saying, and I think this is, me and Tracy consistently talk about this, like, it is not the large organizations that they're going after anymore, just them. It is, if you're small, if regardless of size, then you are a target right now, because distraction is going to be the key when it comes to retaliation. As we are moving forces and dealing with things on a geopolitical, manner, then they're going to be looking, or the bad actors are going to be looking to distract us and our systems. And I think I can speak pretty confidently that they are in our systems, and anybody who thinks they're not, then they're in denial, and they're having to, we're going to have to learn the hard way that this is something that we're going to have to consistently be vigilant about, hyper sensitive to the detections and what's happening around the world, because it will most certainly, and to Tracy's point, it is having a direct effect on Indiana Hoosiers and our companies. So I definitely urge everyone to get the information out. You have social media, be pushing out these resources because people are going to be needing them for sure.
Absolutely, Tracy. You bring up just so many good points there. And I have to say, the inner sci-fi nerd in me really appreciates the Shields Up reference there. So thank you, at least for some for some levity for that piece. But as you say, it's been part of the playbook from Russia in particular for some time now, with attacks on a power grid in Ukraine, on not Petya being a case in point following that, ransomware attacks, of course, as you mentioned, misinformation, disinformation. Interesting, that's a whole nother topic, but we can talk about how much more effective the US government's response has been perhaps this time around to some of that misinformation and disinformation coming out of Russia. But you bring up another really important point, and that's just the vital role that information sharing plays in both spreading information about these threats to our critical infrastructure providers here in the state and otherwise, but also, just sharing cybersecurity best practices. And both of you serve such vital coordinating functions in that regard, including through the Governor's Council on Cybersecurity, which is a particularly, pretty unique and effective organization. So I'm wondering if you guys could both speak a little bit, starting with Tracy, about how you feel, the Governor's Council can be effective, as you say, in spreading information about these types of threats in real time in cases like this, as well as perhaps giving a little bit more context for everybody on how the very recent 2021 Indiana cybersecurity strategy, fits into all of this, and perhaps even, envisions these types of situations. So Tracy, perhaps over to you first, and we'll put up a link to the Indiana cybersecurity strategy for anybody interested as well.
Yeah, please. I would encourage everyone to go out and take a look at the site and get connected with the council here. This is, I'll let Chetrice give all the amazing details, but the one thing that I think that truly puts us in position to be successful and to combat the threats that are coming at us on a very aggressive and consistent basis is collaboration. There's only so much technology can do. There's only so much education that can do as far as, getting folks to be diligent and such. But when we collaborate and work together from the top tiers down to the lower tiers, then we put up much more of a united front and more of a concerted effort, realizing that it's not about me just protecting the footprint that I oversee, but making sure that the individuals around me understand how they can protect themselves and what can I do to help make that happen. That's where we get to build our resilience and our footprint in pushing back against some of these threats and challenges that are out there. And that is by far in my opinion, the biggest asset and advantage of having this Cybersecurity Council. It was originally formulated under former Governor Pence and reiterated through executive order through current Governor Holcomb. And Chetrice has done an amazing job in for 5-6 years now, pulling together hundreds and hundreds of people to have a regular conversation and actually put together action items and activities to help move us all forward. Where we're going with the future of that council and the future of cybersecurity is, how do we address the full picture and try to make sure that at least everyone has the information and ability to be and operate at a level that gives some level of comfort and security for all of us. Small businesses, small governments, healthcare, education, financial services, utilities, defense, any and every industry we have representation for within the council. And we meet quarterly, and Chetrice does an amazing job of actually kind of keeping us moving forward and pushing that needle forward as well, and moving us down the road to more stronger footprint and awareness across the state, more tools and resources to be made available to individuals to take advantage of, and really keeping us in contact with each other, which, with what we're dealing with right now, has already proven valuable, as the communication and collaboration has already started working across the silos that we kind of live and operate in addressing this current threat and challenge overseas. I'll hand it over to Chetrice and let her kind of go into a lot more of the specifics and details of the council, but it is a body that a number of other states have reached out to figure out how we're doing it and how we're continuing to keep engagement and continuing to keep participation. And there are a number of folks in this state that have struggled to figure out how we've continued to keep engagement and keep participation. And literally the strategies that have been put together, the deliverables that each of the committees work on, have provided significant value within those industry spaces and across the spectrum. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chetrice.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Tracy. Tracy's being he's being very modest, because he's been one of the biggest advocates, even when he was at the lieutenant governor's office, when he had a million other things pulling at him, not the full focus of a CIO. And even then, there is always so much power and collaboration, and you get so much done. And it truly, I have these people on the council that, more than 250 members, 35 voting members, 15 committees. And these people come together, and I would say this is something that I think a valuable lesson for any of the listeners too. It's always about the top leadership, and I say all the way to the top, in the sense even for Governor Holcomb, because in the executive order, it specifically talks about developing the council to not just get together and talk about cybersecurity, but specifically to get together and develop a strategic plan with timeframes and quantitative measure and implementation plans, and to implement those things. And so, from the beginning of just being able to reach out to people, we have in writing signed from, two governors now, that it's not enough just to get together and talk, which is a lot of what other states do. And that's still something, most certainly, especially as we're communicating and needing to know who each other are. But you learn so much more, and you get much more, not just the breadth of topics that covers cybersecurity, that I'm sure everyone on this call, this meeting knows it's a large scope, right? But to understand the depth of it and truly lean on experts. And with that, we've been able to, we were able to develop the strategic framework that is different from any other state. It's large, and a lot of people are like, how do you do that with so many people? And it's not like, Tracy and myself and Executive Director Stephen Cox, who's the chair, and Tracy is a co-chair, lead chair on that as well. Us calling people and saying, hey, we really care, we want you to be there. No one is twisting anybody's arm. People just know that this is important. It's the next thing that is going to affect everything in business. It's already doing that now. And so when we're sitting and figuring out, where are we now? Where do we need to be? And how do we get there? You have people diving deep into those questions, even if it's uncomfortable at times, and you have people who are sitting, you have people, the utilities, who are sitting with the regulators. You have law firms who are sitting across the table from other law firms. You have universities, much like Indiana University, Purdue, Ivy Tech, Holy Cross. You have public, private, all coming together saying, this is too big of a problem for one entity to do alone. The state can't do it alone, most certainly. we have to lean on these industry partners, the private partners, vendors. We have to lean on everybody to really truly get the full picture of how we approach cybersecurity at the state level, and how do we do something, not just talk about it. And from the 2018 plan, we had 69 deliverables, 121 objectives with key measurable deadlines, and who is it going to affect and who's in charge of it. And even with COVID, even with the pandemic, and these are all executives on the council, the COOs, the CIOs, the CEOs of companies, directors who've been in their field for 10 plus years, that have completed almost 80% of what they targeted in 2018. And so it really is amazing the amount of work you can get done when you just have people around the table saying, we don't care about the credit. We just want to get something out there because people need this now, and they're never going to spend $30,000 on a cybersecurity service. So in order for us to all be elevated in that cybersecurity posture together as a state, we have to be able to provide free resources. We have to provide things that are turnkey, that anybody and everyone can just go in and start using right off the bat. We need to demystify cybersecurity, right? We need to break it down to what is absolutely necessary for the cupcake shop owner, and equally to what's necessary at our MISO regional transmission operator, right, for energy. And there are things that cross all playing fields in that sense. And now with our 2021 plan that we just put out in October, we have an additional 68 deliverables and 134 objectives in addition to the other ones for a body. I always talk to people and they're always like, so, but this is a council? This is like a government council? Because we run it and we really lean and empower people on the council to do these great things because they believe in it, not because we believe we need to be 100% in charge of it. We need to be, I think, what Tracy does, what Director Cox does, what I do is we are key facilitators in this big conversation that we need to be a part of, and we need to most certainly be a leader in. But it cannot be solved only by a government entity. We need everyone else to be a part of it.
And there's additional value that the government, the state also gains from having a body as broad and diverse and as engaged as our council is. And that's, the time I spent in our lieutenant governor's office, she would often say, we can't govern from within these four walls. We have to understand what's going on out in the communities, what's going on out in the industries. And so without trying to travel all 92 counties on a regular basis and try to figure that out, we have those bodies all coming to us to say, hey, here's what we see, here's what we think, here's what we believe. And we're using that to try and help change policy, both from our state agency perspective, as well as from the legislative perspective. And so this is the group that brings that expertise to the table that we can then say as a uniform and unified front, this is what we see from the industry perspective that makes sense as to how the state could and should and look at considering moving forward to help better things down the road for other individuals across the state. I've worked with a number of councils from agriculture and tourism and housing and counterterrorism across our state agencies for the last 6-7 years. And there's never been anything as robust and as productive as the Cybersecurity Council here. And maybe it was a little bit before its time, but now the attention is definitely strong on the council. And it's, the current events of the world have truly shown helped exude the values and the value from the council, that I see more and more coming down the pipeline for what we're doing. And the state adopting and adapting to more and more of the value that's being brought forward from that group.
Absolutely, Tracy. No, thank you so much for raising that. And I think, it's perhaps unusual, for Indiana to have a council like this when looking across even other states in the Midwest, to say nothing of nationally. So kudos again to both of you for setting this up. It's no easy feat. You brought up communities, Tracy, and this is a kind of one more kind of pre-planned question, guys. So as a heads up, please do start thinking of your own questions for both Tracy and Chetrice. But you brought up communities, and the recent bipartisan infrastructure funding bill provides a lot of opportunities to reinforce the cybersecurity preparedness of local governments against, ransomware attacks, and even some of the, attacks on critical infrastructure that we started off the hour discussing. So I'm wondering if I know it's early days still, but I'm wondering, perhaps Tracy, if you could say a little bit about the plans, for the state in utilizing this funding flowing from the infrastructure bill. And what hopes you have for that in terms of, long-term impacts rather than it just being, a flash in the pan.
Yeah, no, this is a great topic. I can't say how excited I am that this was able to come to fruition finally. For those of you that have been kind of following the federal government's footprint and involvement, when you talk about local government and state and local cybersecurity footprint, these bills have been kind of floating around legislatively at the federal level for a few years now. It would get through one committee and then not get heard on the floor. It'd get through one side of the House or Senate and then not make it across the aisle to the other side. And so the fact that it got pushed into the overall infrastructure bill and then that bill got passed and made it through was just a huge opportunity for us to take advantage of a federal understanding that this is a priority, and hopefully there's enough money to figure out where we are all positioned at in order to know where we need to make progress. I meet with at least from the Midwest CIOs monthly, and we actually met on Tuesday. We do a virtual kind of lunch meeting between myself here in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio, and talk about some strong women. All four of those state CIOs are female. And so they're doing a great job in how they're leading their states. And so they serve as mentors to me, and we kind of help each other kind of go through these things. But we're all trying to figure out what's the best way to take advantage of this infrastructure funding. Local government gets put into a very difficult position with the breadth of pieces that they need to oversee while still trying to understand how to support their local economic footprint, or economic development. They're dealing with opioid issues, workforce issues, housing issues, physical, water, wastewater infrastructure issues. And then we have this kind of silent but deadly cyber issue that a lot are not strongly aware of, but realize it's a major piece of what they need to be figuring out. And this is where we see that potential. We got there's a local government committee within Chetrice's council that we'll be working very aggressively with, that understands kind of more of that perspective than we do at the state level. There are a couple of other associations that represent the local governments that will also be at that table. And then we're trying to deal with the undefined guidelines that are currently out there with what qualifies as cybersecurity worthy to support the funding and grant requests that are out there. But as we sit and look from the state perspective, we realize there's a couple pieces that we think are very vital to the success of any of these programs. One is a true assessment and understanding of where the jurisdictions are at. We don't have a central perspective with what's going on with our local jurisdictions. Indiana's a very referred to as a very home rule state, where kind of local perspective usually overrides and outwins state control and state perspective. So one piece of what we're trying to figure out is where are the locals at, and where do we have the biggest concerns, gaps, holes, and needs that we can start focusing some of that attention and timing there. That second piece then is what does that gap look like? Is that gap purely on education? Is it on policy? Is it purely back on technology? Or is it a combination of all of the above to determine then what's the best approach to help let the jurisdiction move forward? We have some counties where they oversee both the health department, the county courts, and the school district. We have other counties that have a much more narrow focus. We have some counties that have outsourced their IT, some counties that are doing it on their own, struggling. I mean, it's Indiana's a broad mix, and I'm not saying that in a complaining way. It's just the reality of what we have. And so it makes it a little more difficult to say we're going to do one thing across the board for everybody. If we know we want to move the entire state forward, we want to make progress and help everyone make some improvements in their overall posture, we have to figure out what kind of more of that cafeteria style options are to help from the Marion counties to Blackford counties, right? The largest to the smalls, to make something more practical and beneficial for them, while again, focusing on that overall posture of the state being that priority. And then the last piece is the ongoing monitoring and maintenance and continued engagement to make sure that we don't do this and this doesn't become just a one and done or a one-time solution. How do we help you guys, the locals and the municipalities, put things in place that's sustainable, that doesn't require, you know, more funding in a few years, or if it does, we've mapped out how that funding is going to happen in a few years. You know, it's difficult to go out and buy, you know, significant technology investments, and you didn't have to figure out how to license it to keep it updated and maintained year after year after year. And where does the state's role start to come into play with helping make that happen? Or is there potential future federal funding that we can start looking at differently as we, you know, we look at the broadband conversation, what's going on that side, the connection between the two. And so those are all the pieces that we are literally sitting around the table on a regular basis trying to figure out what's the right approach, what's the right pieces that we want to work on. We have a pretty significant program we're making progress on designing, and hopefully we'll get rolled out here soon. But at a minimum, you will absolutely see us starting to figure out ways to get better assessment and understanding of where local jurisdictions are at, so we can then determine what we need to be doing and what we need to be prioritizing to help them make progress.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much, Tracy. Yeah, Chetrice, the local government initiative in particular was brought up. So there's so many aspects of that you could pick up on, I'm sure, but maybe that could be one of them.
Yes, no, you know, I think what's really amazing, and I think it's important to note for the audience, is that, you know, the way that Tracy just explained that, it is already so much further than how other states have set up, right? Because, you know, a lot of CIOs, and Tracy can attest to this, right? Their focus has, and understandably, is on their infrastructure. You know, at a state CIO, their job typically is inward, and you're looking at your agencies, you're looking at your infrastructure, you're aware of what's happening outside, but, you know, and that in itself is a very, very full-time job. But I also have always appreciated Tracy, and even the CIOs that were ahead of it, that have gone through with the council, it's always been very, very important to remember that all these local governments in some way, shape, or form are connected to the state structure, right? The infrastructure. And that makes them a threat to all the information, all the operations, everything that's happening in the state. And then likewise, we're also connected to them, right? So it really does, what I like about this new law, and what's coming down the pipe with the state of Indiana Office of Technology, and partnering with the IECC, and being able to utilize a lot of that expertise to be able to dive quickly into these areas that are really tricky with local governments, is that we all have recognized this is a two-way street, right? This is not, to Tracy's point, going to be a big brother mandate. You really need culture to change. And in order for culture to change, you need to set up a program where people feel comfortable to want to be vulnerable in, and say, yep, I know we're not to what we need to be, but that's okay, because, you know, we're going to work together to move that, even if we can only do it one level up, right? And of course, Tracy and I, our like dream is everyone's at the top most optimized level, because that's what we want, right? But the truth of the matter is to Tracy's point, not doing a one size fits all model, because him and I have most certainly, and I'm sure many people online have seen, whether on the side of being living in a community, working in a community, or studying it, that the one size fits all model with local government just does not work. If anything, it makes them very upset. It makes them defensive. And a lot of people are, you know, may oversimplify and be like, well, you're going to have money and you're going to have resources, so obviously, like, local government's going to take that on, right? They're going to be happy with that. And I'm like, no, because every single one, we have 92 counties, we have 600 municipalities, and so there are 92 different ways that they do cyber, and there are 600 different ways we do cyber. Now, the good thing that we have going for us is, when it comes to cyber hygiene, when it comes to good policies, when it comes to good processes, there are best practices out there that most certainly can be those common factors across the board. But the way that we approach it has to be more personal. the way that we approach even implementing or providing resources, which to the credit of IoT, for example, Tracy looking at these enterprise solutions, a lot of discussions I've ever had with local government has always been, we know we want to do it, we just don't know where to start. Or we know we want to get different infrastructure, better technology infrastructure, but we don't have, because they don't have an IT person, we don't have the expertise to know if the person that's selling us the stuff is actually legit, right? So being able to lean on our state partners, being able to have IoT really take that on and develop collecting that information, but then based on that information, being able to develop those solutions, it is really going to be, I think, such a powerful tool for local governments that I think, with the way that we're looking at, may be very successful here in Indiana. Because we have developed so many relationships over the last several years through the IECC, through the Lieutenant Governor's Office, through other programs, universities. Most certainly, you guys have all really embraced the local government challenge. And it's going to be a tough nut to crack, but I think we have some people who are very passionate and willing to really kind of take that to the max and figure out different ways. So as Tracy and his team are focusing on the strategy and assessment, at the very least, as to his point, we're also working with the council to really kind of figure out how can we really also kind of get into the behavior and the operational side of the various offices and functions of local government, because it's not enough to work with the IT director, do an assessment, and develop the technical infrastructure, which is absolutely needed. And unfortunately, most local governments are very behind on that because they just have not had the money and resources. It's not because they don't care. They are all service hearts like we are. We're trying to figure out how to get that to them. But equally to that, how do we really develop a program where we're communicating and really affecting change at the level of, whether it's a library, your local library, or your local water, wastewater, or your sheriff's department, right? All those may be sharing the same network, but if all those also come to their jobs in a different way, and so to understand those different offices and understand that culture, and then engage them in how we can change some of this discussion around cyber to be more behavioral and really work on the human firewall element in addition to the technology, I think is really what's going to make our program in Indiana really special. And I think people, much like with the IECC and much like with things that IoT is doing at a state level, will have most certainly people come to us and say, hey, how'd you do this? Because we're struggling, because they haven't been lucky to have the leadership we've had in Indiana that's really set up the council, set up these relationships, set up even the RCIO for success in developing these programs. And I think that's something that, again, starts from the top, and then we have to grassroot it from the bottom and meet in the middle. So
that's another piece that makes it very interesting as well. Is this is really kind of the first time I think the state of Indiana has said that technology needs to be addressed and needs to be discussed from the top and from a government perspective. I mean, that's Chetrice's point. You look at, and this is not about getting into anything political or how you feel about what's been going on with COVID or vaccines or anything like that, but you look at our health department director, right? And they are really kind of looking out and understanding and trying to put prescribed direction to help support local execution of health initiatives from a state perspective, right? It's what makes sense from how to go about doing testing, how to go about doing tracing, how to go about doing vaccinations, all of that above. Just how do we operate and lay out guidance and guidelines so that our local health departments, where a lot of that real work is happening at, has some direction and understanding that fits into and follows within the guidelines and the laws that are set forth by the legislature. And respectfully, I look at, we got machines getting viruses, we got machines getting quarantined, we got communities and systems out there that are having similar negative impacts from COVID as well. And I don't see my role or our role at the state level from a technology perspective any different than that. Is how do we put a framework? How do we put foundation? How do we put guidance out there to help those that don't have either the resources, time, or understanding to help themselves? Realizing that I can't be considered successful if they're not successful. That's, I think, the big piece that we're trying to make happen here, and that we want to see more engagement and support and participation in bringing this all together. And then there's that other hat of the other side of me, which is, yes, we still got to take care of the 3 buildings of downtown Indianapolis, make sure that they're secure. I got 31,000 state employees that I need to make sure we're monitoring and protecting and helping them understand how to manage the data that's in their hands. And how do I balance the two of those sides, right? Is how do I protect the state's infrastructure, and then how do I protect the state, or how do I help keep bringing a message forward that moves protection of the state further up the chain and hopefully gets us into a better position for some future funding. I seen one of the questions in here in the chat was talking about funding to help support local infrastructure, water, utilities, and things of that nature. And I think there's 2 pieces of it. One piece that I am doing, and we are doing here from the State Office of Technology, is, we do have some significant leverage and buying power as a large entity compared to a lot of our smaller local jurisdictions. And so what we have started doing more of, we've always done it and have been doing it for a number of years, what we call quantity purchase agreements, or QPAs, where we negotiate with vendors for bigger statewide purchases that allow local governments and local municipalities and some of the utilities, depending on how they're constructed, to be able to buy off of those QPAs and get better pricing and better access to some stronger technologies than what they would otherwise have access to if they're trying to procure that on their own. Those are some of the contracts that we have been, our Microsoft contract, our Dell hardware contract, our Cisco contract, our FireEye contract, our Mandiant contract, all of our contracts, we're looking at every single one of them saying, how do we make this more accessible and more usable for more than just the state of Indiana, and helping give an avenue and give some solutions out there for local governments to be able to tap into. We've also started putting ourselves in position to say, are there services that we can offer that helps extend and provides more secure solutions and secure opportunities to some of the local governments and local municipalities, things like websites and .gov domains and things from that nature, as well as we're looking at expanding that into a more secure email offering. We still have a lot of local governments living off of Yahoo and gmail.com email addresses and websites. And it just continues to raise the question or concern when you're dealing with constituents, is this a legitimate government entity? We want to be able to come alongside and say, hey, look, we understand the dilemma, we understand the challenge, we understand the problem. Here are some offerings that we can provide, hopefully at a more cost-effective solution approach to help you mature yourself as a government entity and help make your constituents a little bit stronger in understanding what it is that you are presenting and providing to them. So it's a lot of small pieces as well as some big pieces that are talked about for bigger funding opportunities. But we're kind of in our first baby steps and starting to get down that path.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Tracy. And you guys have done such a great job of moderating yourselves. You're making this too easy on me. But I think that was a wonderful work of responding to George's point there. Feel free to follow up though, George. And a related one from Grayson, perhaps, Chetrice, you could, attack as well. There is all the attacks on our public health infrastructure, during the pandemic, including resulting, with ransomware attacks just being one among many. And how do we shepherd those limited resources? And of course, Tracy, feel free to jump in on that as well. Because that's no easy feat. As you say, there's a tremendous variety of the different clinics across the state. We've been involved in, I think, one of the studies that the state's doing with the Department of Health to try to get a better sense for where those governance gaps are, what's needed, both in terms of, frankly, cyber hygiene, education, as well as technology to fill some of those gaps. So would you care to comment on all that, Chetrice?
Yeah, I mean, so, to Grayson's question, I think, in addition to everything that Scott just discussed with these partnerships and trying to, when we're looking at the defense strategy, and I think it's really important, you're looking most certainly making sure you have the systems that Tracy was talking about, upgrading the systems to be defensive and not so open and vulnerable. But I think the biggest thing that we really see, and you found this with our 1169 Senate Enrolled Act, is communication. you know, the best defense when it comes to cybersecurity is talking and sharing information, because even when you have a good system, and we have some great, very developed systems, mature systems on our council, and they are the first ones to say, we are attacked every day. We are having to stay on our toes. There's no such thing as a weekend, because we're consistently having to do that. But the fact that they're communicating that with us, the fact that they're sharing bits, you know, key bits of information to then for our, you know, our Indiana ISAC, to be able to get out to local governments, to get out to K through 12s and organizations. You know, I think when you're looking at defense, you know, and we're seeing this now, right? The misinformation, disinformation, the tactic, and it's a very powerful one. People count on the lack of awareness. They count on that cybersecurity in itself it feels so private, and it feels there's almost an aspect of shame from the good old Target days of, you know, how that was handled, right? So now it's happening so much that it's going to be very much like, you know, okay, well, you got an attack. Okay, how can we help you? What else do we need? Do we need to share information of that attack to others because they can protect their systems? Do we need to have good cyber incident response plans there? If you're a local entity, have you contacted the state, the Office of Technology per the new law, to not to get on a shame list, so that we can see, one, what are the attack vectors? How much is it happening? What kind of assistance are local governments needing during those attacks? And just have a better understanding of really the scope that we're dealing with. And then really just opening those trust channels, right? Of you can talk to the Office of Technology, and we're not going to go and share it with the media. You know, we're not going to go and make it a political thing. We are here purely for the sake of, we want our system to be better. We want your systems to be better. We're all in this together. We gotta push forward with it, even if it's an inch at a time. So, you know, I think with limited resources, at the very least, contacting, you know, the Office of Technology, contacting, you know, if anybody's under a cyber attack, you know, first up, contact your law enforcement. It's a cyber crime. It should be reported. You know, contacting your federal agencies and really taking advantage of a lot of those resources out there while you're in a cyber attack is critical. So keeping it to yourself, keeping it internal, those days are gone. People are still stuck in those days, but you're going to find more and more that it's going to hurt them in the long run to not be sharing and getting information shared with them as well. So we're going to be better off for it if we're as part of our key defense in that strategy is communication and being open and vulnerable with each other. I would say, you know, a lot of times I'm like, that's the only time people should be vulnerable in cyber, is get trusted partners and tell them your vulnerabilities and talk about it, because that's the only way we're going to figure out solutions too, right? So we've got to know the problem in order to really come up with the right type of solutions, instead of just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks because we're not getting communicated with enough. So, I mean, that's from my perspective. I'm sure Tracy, especially since you were a key lead on the 1169 and kind of the backing of that, of our defense strategy at the state.
Yeah, I was about to chime in on that specifically. You know, in I can't remember when we did it now, 2019 or 2020, we put in 2021. We put in a new piece of legislation that went active or effective July 1 of 21, called House Bill 1169, requiring reporting of cyber incidents from purely local government, public sector entities, and municipalities. And the key with it was really around just giving us an opportunity to try and hear and gather information and intel on what was going on out across the state. I talk about collaboration. I started off with that, and I'll end with that as well, and keep doing that throughout. Is, you know, a lot of times I see Grayson asked about how we're working our defense strategy. The problem we have is that we're usually not aware that something's going on. Agencies or entities are dealing with the situation on their own. They're struggling with figuring out who to call. They're not knowing to what level it needs to rise to the state. Sometimes it's just pure embarrassment or not wanting to talk about it publicly. Sometimes they're being directed not to, especially if law enforcement or FBI has been engaged or involved. But we would often hear about things like that from a newspaper article a week or two later. And at that point, there's limited opportunity for us to help step up and step in. But we have been collectively from the state perspective here, pulling ourselves together to figure out what are the right situations and where are the right opportunities for us to engage and help support when a situation arises or an incident gets to a level that it needs state involvement. So between my office here at the Office of Technology, our Department of Homeland Security, our Indiana State Police, and our Indiana National Guard, we are regularly in communication with each other, understanding when something is going on. Do we need to be prepared? Do we need to deploy a team? Is there something we can do to help? Of course, we do have limited resources. We all do. That doesn't mean that even when some of the healthcare and hospital organizations are being impacted and attacked, we at least are able to get on the phone and offer advice and guidance and direction and make folks available. We may not be able to deal with the active threat, but as you start going into remediation and recovery, we have resources that can help with that as well. And we've done that for a few jurisdictions that have reached out. We're trying to formalize that more to figure out where the right, like I said, when the right opportunity is, what the right situations are. But it's a tough world, man. It's I think we all want to help. We all want to see progress. We all want to get things done. But we all still have to deal with the laws that we have to work within and the confines around liability and negligence and support and all of those things, those bad words that all you lawyers like to bring to the table when we're trying to we just want to fix and we just want to help. So we're trying to find the right ways to help make that happen. Our local and small government entities and our small businesses, businesses doing business with the state and with other government entities, they need our help the most. And they're the ones that are aggressively being targeted and being intentionally pushed forward, literally just trying to make things, trying to keep the lights on and not having that understanding perspective of the impact of what really they have access to and what they're capable of. So we're here for you.
And we all appreciate that. Thank you so much, Tracy. That's awesome. And of course, you, Chetrice, as well. We have just a little bit more time left. So as we saw, we can do a bit of a lightning round here because as folks are thinking maybe at some other final questions, there's plenty that have occurred to me as well. And, among those, as we, emerge from the pandemic here and fits and starts, and as, more and more folks perhaps are pivoting from working at home, going back to an office, I'm just wondering what impacts or what planning you guys are doing just from a cybersecurity perspective to ease that transition, to make sure that there's not, new vulnerabilities perhaps, or I'm thinking particularly for, small or medium-sized businesses here that could come to the fore. So any, both impacts of the pandemic or as we slowly reemerge here, things to be kind of front of mind from either of you?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Again, trying to delicately manage the world of politics, right? That pandemic is over. You know what I mean? There's definitely still a lot happening and going on out there. The transition from the endpoints of these three buildings to having 31,000 endpoints across the state with managing remote work. A lot of that's going to still be sticking around and trying to figure out the best way to manage a hybrid environment of on-site individuals and off-site individuals, folks still working with their AT&T router that they got back in 2007 when they moved into their apartment or their house that hasn't been updated since then. The biggest challenge I think is the talent, the talent pool and the resource pool that, we're all struggling to figure out and find resources and people and bodies that want to be in this space that aren't afraid to come in and willing to recognize that you don't all have to be a cybersecurity expert. Lawyers in the room, accountants in the room, everybody from every industry needs to understand cyber is a part of their job description. And so whatever background you have to be able to apply that to a cyber or technology position or footprint, I think we would all welcome the opportunity to welcome you into our organizations and such, because we got to build up that talent pool.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Tracy. It's such a good point. I hope the students are listening to as well, because I know there's a lot of allure from the big consultancies and the big law firms, but there's a lot of good and a lot of need here closer to home. That's right. So Tracy, anything else that you'd like to add, on this topic in particular, or we can turn to the rest of our lightning round as well.
Yeah, I think the workforce development component is such a key thing, but also just getting to let people know that, their service and there is a bigger cause to be part of. And I think that's one of the things that's coming out of the pandemic, right? Especially with the Great Resignation, is that people have really figured out that they may not be happy with what they're doing. They want to be connected to something bigger. They want, real value in what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I say this in the sense of like, it is difficult for me to even consider really moving forward from where I am. And I know Tracy and I kind of share this, like, once you're bit by the service bug and you realize how much there's to do and how much that you need the cyber warriors and advocates and everything there, that's what we need. We need people that, have heart and want to be part of something bigger and a solution that's going to make a difference on their kids. And that's the kind of, thing there. I also like the fact that, with the state of Indiana and even Governor Holcomb put out some information last week with state employees that they're really looking to figure out, how do we keep talent? How do we look at being more flexible? Because that most certainly has come out of the pandemic, right? The days of no matter what, your butt needs to be in a seat, and it's not the most critical thing in your job is over now. So figuring out that hybrid model, figuring out that balanced model is something that I think is really honestly been a benefit in some ways, but a lot to do in a short period of time. But this is, to Tracy's point, I mean, it's a lot, and it's going to be going for a while. And I always kind of say cybersecurity, it's a long game. So we have some short wins, but when you're really in it, you're going to have to wait a while to see the true benefits of the stuff you work on. And that's okay, because the stuff will last, it'll last decades after hopefully I retire. So long for now.
That's right. That's right. There's not a finish line. It's a marathon. But your point about just cybersecurity being this vital helping profession, I think that's so important. And I think that can help galvanize hopefully more and more students, hopefully a more diverse array of students to kind of take up the call, as you say, Chetrice. And maybe just briefly on that point, it is Black History Month after all. And you guys are both such senior leaders and diverse leaders in a field that, as we all know, unfortunately, is frankly just way too homogenous still, STEM broadly, but also cybersecurity. So I'm wondering if you just care to reflect a little bit or have any words of wisdom, for folks who are, both obviously, from various backgrounds, what we can do more to help, mentor students, to encourage them to take up the call of cybersecurity, and any just reflections from either of you on what it's like to be members of either minority group, female, in a state that outside of a few cities like Indianapolis and Bloomington is, pretty homogenous, let's face it. So any kind of reactions, reflections there, perhaps Tracy first, on what we can do to increase, the diversity of folks entering cybersecurity and your own, of course, experiences?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I appreciate you posing that question and acknowledging that. And it's a major topic, and it's not just about necessarily the diversity. We need bodies, period, but more diverse individuals at the table, expanding the conversation and bringing different perspective. I've been very blessed with the positions I've had, and from being the first Black chief of staff for our lieutenant governor to now being kind of at the top of the technical pyramid here for Indiana. A lot of what I have seen has been really just making myself available for expanding into areas that may or may not be traditionally open areas, pushing ourselves and accepting the challenge to be in those conversations, and not letting myself be held back or held down by others' perspective or opinion on how it should and shouldn't work. I mean, I think that's a big piece of it, is kind of breaking the bad analogy. I'm trying to think of a better word to say this before it comes out of my mouth, but kind of breaking the mental shackles that says, hey, look, I belong at the table. I have an opportunity to present myself. I know what I know. And respectfully right now, I do have the confidence of the governor and a lot of our senior leadership. And it has nothing to do with, where I'm from or what I've been through. I grew up in the inner city in Detroit. And so have clawed my way to where I'm at, to being, a very high ranking official individual here in a different state. Lots of good mentors, lots of good relationships, and lots of good faith and confidence in knowing that what I know and what I've learned and what I've been through in life and in my various previous positions has continued to provide and add value that continues to open more doors and opportunity for me. And so that's what I try to tell that message to, my kids and other kids around us, is our biggest thing holding us back is ourselves. And don't let that be you. Fight and overcome your own, what you believe are your own shortcomings or own lack of self-esteem in some areas. to have that confidence to know that you really can make a difference and you really do belong and deserve that seat at the table.
What a fantastic note to end on, Tracy. But yeah, Chetrice, please. I know we're out of time, but would welcome your quick reactions too.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I think to add to Tracy's point, you know, especially as a woman in a very male-dominated field, I mean, as much as I appreciate when I go to conferences, there's never a line at the women's bathroom, but I would say, you know, the diversity and having allies and really truly, you know, mentors that challenge you, not just say yes to everything you're saying, but really make you feel sometimes uncomfortable in those conversations, right? And that's what we need to do to grow, right? Growth doesn't come out of being comfortable. It comes out of being uncomfortable and pushing yourself out. But I couldn't agree more with Tracy's approach on this. You know, same here. I come from very different backgrounds. I've been very lucky to have very amazing, strong male leadership in my career. That's allowed me to really get ahead very quickly in state government, where typically that wouldn't have been the case. I think working at Department of Revenue and working with a lot of people that came from the finance industry helped with that kind of private thinking, private industry thinking also helps. So, you know, again, just, you know, challenging yourself, keeping the conversations going, and really, you know, never being afraid to ask for thoughts and advice. You know, these topics are not taboo topics. I don't like it when people are like, oh, I don't want to bring up the woman question, or I don't want to bring up but we need to discuss that, because there are other women, like to Tracy's point, my kids listen to me and they're always very surprised and like, wow, you get to do what you do. And I'm like, yeah, I get to do what I do because I listen, and I to Tracy's point, I know I deserve as much to be there, but I also know what I don't know. And I know that I also need to sit and listen too. And so being able to be on both sides of that is important. And not only as a student, a professor in the professional career, but I just think as a human being, we just need to be better about listening and making uncomfortable changes to ourselves so that we're bettering ourselves. So.
That is just so fantastic. Thank you so much, Chetrice. And speaking of, our next speaker in the series is Lynn Dome, the Executive Director of the Women in Cybersecurity, coming up on March 31st. But you both are such stellar role models, fantastic speakers, amazing leaders in the state. We're so lucky to have you both join us today and to do so much to help keep us safe. So how about one more round of applause? Apologies, guys, for keeping you a few minutes over, but that was brilliant. Wonderful discussion. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoons. Thanks again, Tracy and Chetrice.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.